I see on my side in the community is that the things that they're thinking, they don't realize how that sort of plays out in their everyday life. So somebody may be motivated, let's say, to perform at a high level in a sport, or do a lot of exercise, or eat a specific type of, let's say, fad diet to obtain, let's say, a particular body shape or body size or percentage of body fat. The message that people are getting is that these behaviors are exemplary of their success, and that they display their value as a person. And so they are not able to connect the fact that they have a deep need to be accepted, a deep need to be valued. And therefore, the decisions that they've made, those behaviors that they've chosen to achieve something, are actually detrimental to them. And so just to make crystal clear for our community, you're saying that without looking into those motivations, we are liable to kind of end up doing any manner of things in service of perhaps a negative kind of mindset or a negative drive.
And there can be this kind of desire to be better than others that is demonstrated this way. And that I think almost always gets everyone in trouble, whether you're demonstrating your superiority through, say, money or grades or some other tangible evidence, that may not be at all what you want to be doing. And you're doing it defensively, or you're doing it to support your ego needs. But really, your real audience is yourself, and you're neglecting your real audience. I think some of this is sort of what I would say a false sense of achievement, in the sense that you haven't really achieved what you think you've achieved if the audience is not yourself.
Totally. I also just want to remind people of what you just mentioned about cognitive health. One of the things that some people will say to me is that, they feel such a high level of anxiety when they're in a state of, when they are not getting a period, when they have FHA or HA, they feel such a high state of anxiety. And it is very difficult to convince people that hypervigilance, that very high state of anxiety that's coming because of being underfed and undernourished, is only being exacerbated by the fact that their brain is literally not getting enough energy.
Right.
And so you're just confirming that that people need calories, you need glucose, you need food to feed your, to calm that down.
And we don't want people to just be thinking about themselves, right? We are living in balance with others. And so, we are always in a state of negotiation between, ourselves and the rest of the world. So this is not just to eschew all of the rest of the population and say they're not important. But I mean, it's really around, if you want to do something helpful for others, you have to be healthy yourself first. And, when it comes to reproductive function and someone's anticipating becoming a parent, one has to be thinking about what one will be as a parent. And if one wants to be a certain kind of parent, you have to get yourself ready to be that kind of parent. So we have cognitions around what we are going to become. And we have to do some homework around that, think that through. Because sometimes people are just trying to be perfect. And perfect is almost always the enemy of good in this context. So one of the things that we uncovered was this desire to be perfect. Now, this can have a number of different sort of feels to it, right? It's, in some level, if you want to be perfect, it's unachievable. So, that illusory idea that some human could be perfect is almost a form of ambushing yourself, if you will, not liking oneself. But it can also be kind of arrogant, it can have an arrogant feel to it. Like, I want to be better than everyone else. And why would that be, right? And so one has to deal with the constructs behind the desire to be perfect. And so not everyone's motivation for wanting to be perfect is the same, but let's just say that it's an unachievable thing. So since it's unachievable, we have to talk people out of wanting to be perfect. It can be good, and you can be good at something, and it can be excellent, and that's all great. That, you know, desire, that ambition to make a contribution is also good, but it needs to be tamed so that it's not a weapon against others or oneself. And that's what I think a lot of time people struggle with, is like, how much perfection do they need to have before they like themselves?
How much perfection do they need to have before they like themselves? It's a great question. It's a wonderful question. I have lots of people that write to me and say that they do things they do because they want to be special, that they want to kind of stand out. And it's very interesting that tends to be a running theme in this community, right?
No pun intended, right? A running theme.
Oh, yeah, that's right. No pun intended, exactly. Which, you know, and we're having this conversation, and it seems, again, these are these things that we're talking about mental health, and it seems very clear to us. And yet, you know, my girls go to a gynecologist, and they're still asking them to take birth control pills to get your period back. And it's just infuriating, because the way you're laying this out, it is so clear that people in this category need they need more, you know, mindfulness and sort of internal work than any kind of other. By the way, everybody, if your gynecologist tells you to take birth control pills to get your period back, just run out the door and run out the door. Pun intended, run out the door. But it's so clear. It's so clear, yet there is still a lot of skepticism and pushback on this whole concept that you would think that by now we understand that mental health and physical health are indeed the same thing. And it is amazing that there is still that level of skepticism. It's quite shocking. I have women in my community that are my age or older, kind of headed toward that perimenopause stage, and they don't get a period. And they are asking me and asking themselves, is it worth it? Because they feel as though I'm going to lose it all anyway, and I'm not going to be making estrogen. So any, you know, protective measure from estrogen, so bone health, cognitive health, heart health, like, it's going to go away anyway. Why am I wasting my time doing this? What would you say to someone like that?
Well, so when you're in a reproductive time frame and you still have eggs, and, you know, I mean, that's when you can tell that your body's out of balance, because you can track your periods. But you can still be out of balance, even though you're not having menstrual cycles. You just have lost one of the signals that's demonstrating that. So cortisol is a hormone that is essential, but when it's high, it can cause harm. And when it's too low, it can be bad also, not to have enough. So it is needing to be tightly regulated. And just to demonstrate that, and actually I wasn't trying to demonstrate this, I just did this. I was actually norming the standard in my laboratory by measuring cortisol every 15 minutes for 24 hours and looking at the daily pattern. So we did that in 10 people in San Diego. And then I moved my lab and I moved it to Pittsburgh, and I wanted to redo that study. And so I did 10 more normal ovulatory women with progesterone levels that were in the 10 nanogram or higher level per ml, and proved that they were ovulatory, and then looked at their cortisol levels. So that was my physiologic norm for cortisol. And then I just took the sum of both populations, and it was 66.6 for one population and 66.8 for another population. And then I realized this is a tightly regulated hormone. Like, it doesn't have across the day, it has excursions, But if you were to ask, the body seems to have invested quite a lot in making this hormone excursion across the day pretty similar across people. So there must be some tightly controlled mechanisms for keeping it in place. So another hormone like this is glucose. Too much is not good for you. Too little is not good for you. And your body actually has a pretty narrow range of glucose that it will try to aim for. So cortisol, glucose, maybe other hormones are like this too. You know, to achieve endocrine health, they have to be in a pretty narrow range. So let's define endocrine health by looking at people whose bodies seem to be running fairly well. And one way of doing that is to look for women whose reproductive cycle is pretty normative. And that's what we did. And when you go back, actually, they're more similar than not. We once did a study looking at successful aging. And what was interesting is when we looked at the hormone levels of very old people, they called it that, not my name, but over 80, their hormone levels were in the normal range. And so one had to ask, hard to prove, but one had to ask, is being in endocrine health the way we stay healthier longer? And, you know, it certainly hints at that. And so the idea behind all of this is your reproductive system is signaling imbalance. It's not that you need the reproductive system to restore balance. It's actually signaling to you when the balance isn't right. But do you, when you're no longer having reproductive cycles, still need to have endocrine balance? Of course you do. It doesn't go away at any age. So it's not about having endocrine balance to keep your menstrual cycle going. It's about having endocrine balance to keep yourself going.
I love that. Thank you for saying that. That's awesome. I know that's gonna ring in a lot of people's ears that are watching this. Going back to the group, the younger group that watch this channel, the high school, college girls that are really kind of heading into what we might consider a very stressful moment of life, right? Some of them are going to be competing in college athletics. Some of them are, before motherhood, they're in that sort of ramping up phase of their reproductive life, and they're struggling with all of the things that we've talked about in terms of overexercise, undereating for all the various reasons. And so if you could, be sort of like endocrine fairy godmother for those ladies, if you could wave your wand, what would you say to that group in terms of looking at your work and understanding how disorder at the beginning stages might play out in their reproductive life? What sort of experience do you have with that sort of trajectory or that journey for them?
I mean, you're basically talking about how much ambition can one body afford? And there are different kinds of ambition, right? But I think typically we try to find something that we think we're going to be good at, see if we are good at that. And, then if that's not quite right, adjust. And so, we're in constant pursuit of something, some goal, some ambition, some more than others. But I think having ambition itself is not bad. I think that that's an important point. But when the ambition becomes imbalanced and it consumes you literally, then it's not the right ambition and it needs to be moderated. So this is all about getting back to moderation with your goals, and it has to be achievable. So you don't want to make an ambitious goal that's not achievable, because it's going to make you feel like a failure if you pick the wrong goal.
Or not achievable in some way, right?
Yeah, or not, whatever it is. So some people are, have a certain height. You can want to be 4 inches taller, but I think we're all smart enough to know that's not very likely. So, okay, that's so easy, that's a trivial way of looking at it. But there are other things like that where really it's not possible that, you can't be 4 inches taller than you are. And so you have to decide if that goal is actually realistic. So one of the tenets of CBT is to identify what's realistic in self and others. So if someone wants something from you and it's an unrealistic expectation of you, how do you tell them? I don't think I can do that. It's not within me. I don't have that to give. I can't be that. That is all of human nature, right? We're always negotiating with each other about how much is too much expectation. But if you are also beating up on yourself that way at the same time, the blows from others are sometimes much more painful if they're, leaning in on you in an unrealistic way. So you have to start with understanding yourself and what's realistic for you so that you, again, can give to others as well as get from others. So, it's not to just be selfish. That's not what I'm saying. It's not ambition for its own sake either. Just because one achieves something like a BMI of 19 does not make someone healthier if that's not a good BMI for that person. And that it's actually true for people that are overweight. We don't always know what is the right BMI for them. These sort of, ideal body weight, that's actually something that they put out. It's a Metropolitan Life height weight table.
Yeah.
And it's ideal body weight, and like ideal body weight. And then they allow for body frame. So you have just three options. So this does not describe humanity.
No.
Right. And so, and it's, we use it, but we don't want to use it as a weapon. So we have to recognize everybody's body is not the same shape. And, it's going to vary how people actually need to look, right? How much they need to eat, how much they need to exercise. So if you are not very good at running because your body doesn't really have that shape, then to run something like a long distance is going to be more energy and it's going to be more stressful because you're really not built to run like that. And, I think people look at their body. I mean, not everyone can do gymnastics, right? You have to have a certain body shape. And if you don't have that body shape, you can't do those things. So people figure that one out because not everyone, it is pretty remarkable that some people can. And so you can enjoy those who know how and who are able. But, I think it isn't meant to get everyone to be the same. So that tyranny of everyone having to be X body shape or X body weight needs to be the first thing that we address with people. There is no such thing as ideal body weight.
Right. Excellent. I'm so glad you said that. I think that's particularly important in the cases where people tend to think that they have to get to a certain point and then stay there, maintain a body weight. Back in the day, people used to be fond of saying things like, oh, I'm in my high school jeans still, or I'm in my, college jeans, and we're in our 30s and 40s. And there seems to be somewhat of a premium placed on that as well, that body changes should be avoided at all costs. And I think it's important what you just said, because not only should your body look different than everybody else's, but your body may in fact look different across your life spectrum, and what your body needs at different times in your life is important. I have women on this that watch this channel that are pregnant, they are breastfeeding, they are before pregnancy, they're after pregnancy. And it's great for them to know that their requirements and their shape and size and everything about their body is going to change along their life a lot.
And I think that is the other thing is, like, again, we have these, I think, overly simplistic ideas, which is another form of unrealism. Yeah. So the idea that you're, going to be perfectly shaped forever is just torture, right?
Yes.
And so why torture yourself? Because no one benefits when you're in a tortured state. And, there's studies suggesting that there's a good weight for, and a good weight is in this range. So, first of all, the concept of range. And then that being in this range is associated with longevity, suggests that that range is somewhere close to physiologic harmony. And so, but within that range is like, it's a 40-pound range.
Yeah.
Within this range, you can achieve some kind of endocrine balance and physiologic harmony that is health promoting for you, barring some other consequence like getting a really bad malignancy. So what are the things that we can do to promote health that are achievable, doable, feasible activities? And what are the things that are so unrealistic that they actually undermine our goal of health and being a contributing member of a group? That is where we struggle every day, but it shouldn't be that you are struggling to a goal that is unrealistic. You should be struggling for maintaining the middle, the balance, the harmony, and not being at some extreme.
Right. I love that you said that. I just want to also point out or underscore what you just said about being a part of a community, and sort of when you are fed and when your brain is online and when your body is in balance, you're able to give and be a member of this society. You're able to give the best of yourself to the world. I think what we're seeing a lot is that, especially with the pushback against diet culture, particularly in America, we're seeing that women are starting to understand that diminishing themselves is really taking the best of them out of contribution to humanity, and that the amount of energy being wasted on calculating calories and counting up mileage is really energy that could be better spent in service of others or contributing in a way that is much grander. So I just want to underscore that because you mentioned it a couple of times, and it's worth repeating. Also, and this is going to be my last question because I really do appreciate your time. You and I spoke offline about what you just began to speak about, which is the harmony and the balance. And so the final question would be, how would you suggest to women to approach things like exercise, things like diet, things like stress, when we're trying to achieve moderation? You spoke about moderation being emblematic of discipline. Can you tell me about that a little bit more, to explain a little bit about that? And I would love for you to make my girls fall in love with moderation. I really would. So
yeah, I think moderation is achievable. It's, definable, but it's going to be different again from person to person, right? And so it is your personal definition of moderation that you need to achieve. And so it's a lifelong goal. And, we're never done. So we're always looking for the middle. And that gives us some stability. It's an anchor, if you will. And then if we have a bad day, we, get blown off that a little, but we come back to moderation so that, we can absorb hits that are bad days in some way. But if we don't know where the middle is, then we can absorb very much of life. And so it's harder if you're not in a harmonious state with yourself, don't know yourself very well, because you are ultimately the instrument of moderation is you. And so it starts with self-reflection, self-knowledge, and the discipline to actually spend at least some part of your day maintaining yourself, so that then you can do the other things that you want to do, whatever those creative things are. And I think part of it starts with understanding that really what's interesting about people is not their perfections, it's their quirks, their idiosyncrasies, their entertainments, their laughter, all the things that aren't quite right necessarily about how they look or behave. Those are the the humanities that make for theater and art and fashion and, you know, fantastic recipes, you know, all the things that are kind of, I would say, inventive and creative are the entertainments that allow for a rich life. So you start with the moderation, the acceptance of your imperfections, and then you can start building in a different way a life that is about the creative, inventive side of yourself. So it's an embrace of that kind of creativity to be a you that is deeper in some ways and more connected to others through some other means of expression. So I think everybody has something that they want to say or do or show. You know, I mean, it's easiest to think about for, you know, art, right? That people have a vision that they'd like to paint for others, for instance. Or, you know, if you are into some kind of other creative thing, like, you know, creating wild looking fashion, you know, it's a form of expression that should be fun, not necessarily about being better. And so part of what I have worked with in cognitive behavioral therapy is embracing the fun side of yourself, you know, actually liking yourself in that way that you're kind of self-entertaining. And then you can try to entertain others, always more difficult than entertaining yourself for some. But, you know, being playful and joyful, that is part of harmony.
You are lovely, honestly. You really are. I could listen to you talk about this stuff all day. And I am so grateful. I hope that the community enjoys it as much as I did. This is really great.
Well, I wanted to say that it's fun for me, actually. And one of the things that I have learned from watching people struggle like this is just the importance of balance also. So none of this is coming from my knowing the answers. It's coming from my heart that I am engaged in this too, that I am walking with people who, like myself, are looking for a way to really be helpful. And so if you can help someone, there is nothing more exciting in some ways. But, you know, it also means that you did the homework. So I think none of us put ourselves out there as the true experts. And so it doesn't come from that place for me, at least. So it's a great privilege to meet you, Jill, and to meet your group. And so it's just been really an honor. I appreciate the opportunity.
Goodness, thank you so much. I'm going to ask you to hang on and I will say goodbye to everyone today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. If you have questions, you can email me at caseofthejills@gmail.com. You can follow me on Instagram at @caseofthejills. Thank you so much, Dr. Berga.
Welcome.